Hey, what's the difference between a Ford Mustang and a Bronco?
I don't know, what?
Well, one will get you 0 to 60 in 3.5, one will get you 25 to life, depending on how good of a football player you were.
I don't get it.
That's okay, neither will most of my audience who weren't around in the 90s. Hello all, I'm Josh, this is Josh Builds Stuff, and I like cars. I like cars with big loud combustion engines, yeah. I like cars with smaller, quieter electric engines, yeah. I like cars of all shapes and sizes, new and old, and if you're like me and you like cars and you like Lego, then I've got the theme for you. It's Lego Speed Champions, if you hadn't already guessed by, the thumbnail and the fact that I've got like a bunch of cars on the table right in front of me. What are all these cars, you might be asking? Well, if you didn't look at the thumbnail, this is all of the 8-stud wide Lego Speed Champions cars from 2020 and 2021. We have a semi-unique opportunity here, and that's that we can talk about the Lego Speed Champions theme, which is a relatively new theme. A lot of other Lego themes have been around for years and years, and they've got hundreds of sets in their back catalog and whatnot, and you couldn't possibly collect them all. But here I have before me all of the 8-stud wide Speed Champions cars, because the theme's only been around since about 2015. But in 2020, they switched from a 6-stud wide car to an 8-stud wide vehicle. I have some of the older cars. I'm not going to talk about those. I'm really only talking about these 8-stud wide cars because they're the ones that I like a lot better from this theme. If you're not already a fan of the Speed Champions theme, well, maybe today's video will help convince you to become a fan. If you are already a fan of the theme, well, then maybe some of what I say will, commiserate with your own thoughts and feelings. But ultimately, I'm making this video for the person who watches my videos the most, and that's me, because I have to edit them and watch them a bunch of times to make sure that the edits come out okay. So in reality, I'm making this video for myself more than anyone else, because I like the Speed Champions theme a lot, and I wanted to talk about them even more. We've had a bunch of reviews go up lately about the new Speed Champions cars, and I try to keep those videos relatively focused and specific on individual cars at the time of making those videos, but I have much more thoughts on the entire theme, and I was like, all right, I'll just throw those other thoughts into a different video. This is that other video. So I hope you'll enjoy. I hope you'll come along for the ride. Here's what we're gonna do. We'll talk about the good things about this theme, some of the upsides. We'll talk about the less good things or the downsides about this theme. I will attempt to pick some favorites from this bunch of cars in front of me, though I don't think it will be easy, and I will talk about my hopes and dreams for the future within the context of this theme. We'll talk about some of the things that we would like to see come out of the Speed Champions theme in the coming years. If you're along for that ride, then buckle up, because safety first. Let's go for a drive as we talk about some cars. So let's talk about what I like about this theme first, but before we do, some context of what's actually in front of me. There are 7 cars from the 2020 Speed Champions line. There are 9 cars from the 2021 line. All of these, or most of these cars, have some sort of review or speed build video on my channel, so check those out. So let's talk about the good things about this theme. The first good thing, you've probably heard me say this before if you have watched any of my videos, my favorite kind of Lego set is one that has good displayability and good playability, and Speed Champions cars have both of those things in spades. I love the way that these cars look on a shelf, or even just like on a table when they're all together like this right now. I'm like, man, these cars look super cool just sitting here. But my kids really like playing with these cars. In fact, I've had to bar the door from the tiny barbarians that live in my house just to keep them away from these cars for long enough for me to make this video. They would love to drive these cars around. Unfortunately, playing with these cars usually to them looks like crashing these cars into each other or off of the table, and then they tend to fall apart, or at least parts of them pop off and fall apart. These cars are relatively durable as far as Lego sets go, but a lot of them have spoilers or some looser parts that will pop off and a kid can do some damage too. So something else that's nice about these cars is they're all relatively small. They don't take up much space to display. Obviously, if I have 16 cars in front of me, it is a little more difficult to display all of them, but still there are single Lego sets which take up more room on a shelf than this one. Like here I have Some of you might recognize this. It's from the new Black Widow movie. Look, it looks like a Black Widow, the hourglass symbol. No, this is the Cloud City Lego set that came out, I don't know, a few years ago at this point. This sucker is sizable, that's to say the least. And it is stored in my closet. In this state, there's no accessories or minifigures or anything on it because it is in this sad state because it takes up too much space to actually display. But I could display all these cars. I'm saying this and realize now that I don't actually display any of these cars. I had to grab a couple of them out of storage just to bring them here today. But the point is still well made, he said to himself in a room by himself. The point still stands that these cars can be displayed and they don't take up too much space while being displayed. And speaking of small children barging into offices, that's another nice thing about these sets, is that they have a wide appeal because adults and children alike, we all like cars, at least to some degree. Unfortunately, I don't know that they have as much gender appeal. Cars and even still Lego sets to some degree are unfortunately still mainly targeted towards boys. And I'm not saying that girls cannot or should not like Lego sets or cars, but that's just the reality of the situation. But little boys, I can speak from experience, they love cars and they want to crash them into stuff. I like cars, maybe I'm the same way. I would love to crash these cars into stuff if I didn't want to display them so badly. So that's the second good thing about this line, is that they appeal to a very wide audience. And then the third upside to this theme is that the builds are really nice for the most part for all of these sets. They are all very similar to each other, but I think they're all different enough that they're all still enjoyable in their own rights. I say it in the beginning of almost every build video for all of these sets that I'm like, the build for these sets are nice. They don't take very long. They're about 300 pieces. They take about an hour at most to put together, and that's great. That's nice because it doesn't take too long. But there is a downside also related to the build. So let's talk about the downsides now as well of this theme. The first downside is that the builds are quite, how do I put it? They're quite tedious and small, obviously, because the entire build gets put together and it's just the size of one car at a time. And so it's not like a building or a larger set which gets built up and uses a lot of like 2x4 and 4x4 pieces and plates and all kinds of things that would make a much larger Lego set. Because you're building a smaller set, most of those 300 pieces that go into this set are tiny, and so you're doing a lot of little detailed work rather than big sculptural kind of building. So just know what you're getting into. I guess some people could say that that's a downside. Personally, I don't mind small, tedious builds myself. The other downside to these sets kind of has to be said because everyone says it whenever they talk about Speed Champion sets, and that is that most of these cars use a lot of stickers on them, and that is just kind of a necessary evil with this line because a lot of the cars that we're trying to depict are actually like specific vehicles, like the recent Ford Bronco that we just got. That's depicting the specific Baja Ford Bronco that is an actual vehicle that exists in the real world, and it has very specific paint job and decals and stuff all over it. And that's the case with a lot of these cars, and so unfortunately the only way that we can really depict a lot of those details is with stickers. And so that is a downside. A lot of these sets contain a lot of stickers, but once you look past that and you just look at the car for what it is, there's still there's a lot to appreciate about these cars. The last downside I'll bring up, and I only really bring this up because I have all of these cars sitting together, is that some of them are slightly disproportionate to each other. Obviously, all of these cars are 8 studs wide, but that's a little weird because I've got like a Lamborghini Urus, it's an SUV here, and it's sitting next to Nissan GTR. And these two cars, in terms of like Lego sets, they're very similar sizes, but in real life, like the SUV would be much larger than a GTR. And even like the Ferrari, which one is this? Like the F8 Tributo, I think this is. Like it looks kind of small and minuscule, and really it's a large supercar, and it would be slightly larger next to all of these other cars. So it's only really noticeable when you stick them in a context like this, but like they're a little disproportionate to each other. But even still, like Lego's doing what they can with the scale here, so we can't really complain that much about the scale. If you wanted to look for one more downside and say that the scale was off, you can say that they're not really scaled to minifigures, but like I've heard other creators in the past say, minifigures aren't scaled to normal humans, and if we're building cars in this case that look like cars in the real world, well, we are human beings that fit into those cars, and minifigures they're not human beings. I don't know how many times I have to say this, minifigures are not human beings. They don't have feelings, they don't have souls, and so we don't have to feel so bad when we literally tear them apart limb for limb. We've gotten slightly off topic. Minifigures have strange proportions. These cars have proportions that exist in the real world. Minifigures don't exist in the real world. Let's batter in this point farther and further. Let's keep going until we get to the point. The point is that minifigures have weird proportions. That's the entire point. I'm not even going to call that a downside. That is an aside to this entire conversation. Those were the good sides and the bad sides of the Speed Champions cars. Let me know if you agree or disagree with those. Let's talk about some favorites of these cars. A top 10, if you will. I don't think we can do a top 10 in this case, but we will attempt to do some manner of favoritism in the context of these cars. I say that it would be difficult to do a top 10 out of these, what did I say? We had 16 cars in front of us. It would be weird to do a top 10, right? Because we'd really just be doing a bottom 6 in that case. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do like a top 3 or just like point to my favorite out of all of these cars. But even then I'm like, is it my favorite based on the car that the set is supposed to be portraying? Or am I saying this is my favorite based on which car I think Lego did the best job of depicting as a Lego set? And I guess I'll try to answer both of those right now. So like the car that just like off the top of my head, if you're like, which of these cars do you like the best? I would say it's the Lamborghini. This is like the weird Lamborghini, the like Super Trofeo Evo Lamborghini, I think it was called. This is the Huracan, that's what it is. The Lamborghini Huracan plus a bunch of other crazy names. Just as a car, I think I like this one the best, but I don't know that this one is the best depicted subject matter out of all of the cars here, because there's another, I guess, slight downside to Speed Champion sets, and that is that at their scale, we are limited by the number of details that can be put into a car that is this size. And so that's why we end up depicting a lot of those details with decals and stickers, that is. But at this size, it's hard to get all those details. And so when we try to depict a crazy looking car like a Lamborghini Huracan or like the Koenigsegg Jesko or something from the newest line, those cars, the proportions, they get a little weird, and it's hard to show like really tiny fine details, which are plentiful in big crazy looking supercars. It's hard to show those at a small Lego scale. And so I don't actually think that like my top car, my favorite, might be the Lamborghini Huracan, but like I don't think that's the one that's best depicted as a Lego set. Honestly, if I'm picking like a favorite as like just a best depicted, it might just be something simpler, like the new Corvette Stingray. What was this, a 66 Corvette Stingray, the old school Stingray? That car, I think, looks really nice, and for one reason. That's that the car, the design itself is simple. That might be that cars in the 60s were a little simpler. I think the Dodge Challenger from the Challenger versus the Pro Dragster or whatever it is. I think the little Dodge Challenger from that set also looks really nice, again, because the design is very simple. And so I can only assume the Speed Champions team at Lego are kind of having to play a delicate game of balancing. That's a weird game to have to play. They're having to balance those two factors, in that they could build a much simpler car model and it would be easier to depict in this scale, or they can pick a cooler, nicer car, but it's going to be a lot harder to get those little details depicted very well in this same scale. So to summarize, if I'm picking favorites, just my favorite car as overall, as a car from this bunch, it's just the Lamborghini Huracan. That's as hard to say as I'm making it seem like it is to say. My favorite car, that's just like, I think that is depicted the best as a Lego set from this bunch, is, again, the classic Corvette Stingray. Sometimes I like to talk about my hopes and dreams, and now seems like a good time to do so. I hope and I dream that someday Lego will make a large-scale, very detailed version of the Nautilus submarine from the classic Jules Verne novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But if you would like me to keep my hopes and dreams to the context of the cars that are in front of me, I guess we can try to do that. I hope that Lego makes something new and weird for this theme. And I don't mean weird like the Top Fuel Dragster. That was a little too weird. More specifically, I hope that Lego makes some Formula One cars in the Speed Champions theme. They have actually done this before, if we're talking about cars that we want. I understand that Lego, in the Speed Champions theme, they have made Formula One cars. They have made them from Mercedes and from Ferrari, and they are in the smaller scale of cars. They have not done that since we've moved to this 8-stud wide format, and so that's why I hope that we see a recreation of Formula One cars in this new scale. Like a lot of Americans, I can imagine, they I've watched that Netflix show, Drive to Survive, which is great. There's like, I think 3 seasons of it now, and it follows like some stories of Formula One drivers and the teams. It's a great introduction to the sport. I would recommend it to anyone. Someone else, please watch Formula One so I have someone to talk about the races with on a weekly basis. Once they're coming to Austin in October, I may actually try to go, but we'll see how the details work out. If we're just making like more normal cars, we're never going to get normal cars, right? Because it's speed champions, like they're race cars, supercars. That's what people like. They're loud cars and fast cars, and I'm running out of adjectives here to describe the cars. That's what people want, and that's what we're going to get from the speed champions line. So don't be like, I want a Toyota Corolla because that's the car that I drive. We're not gonna get one of those, but you might get a supercar or a cool car. You want a Mitsubishi Evo, you want a Subaru Forester, not a Forester, like a WRX, like a cool Subaru or something, like a rally car. Those are completely within the realm of reality for the Speed Champions line. Personally, I like Lamborghinis. Like, give me more Lamborghinis. Give me classic Lamborghinis. Give me new Lamborghinis. Lamborghinis have been made before. We know they can be made before. Plus, it's fun to say Lamborghini, Lamborghini, Lamborghini. But even all that to be said, I'll happily take more supercars and sports cars. I'm not as into rally cars. I'm not as into like the Toyota Supras and whatnot. Like, I like the Koenigsegg's and the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, the McLarens, what's the other weird one out there? Pagani? I think Pagani is who I was thinking of. They make like the Zonda, whatever it is. It looks like a spaceship that is a car. I like these companies that make very fast, very cool cars, and I would love to see them and own them as Lego sets. If you are of the former camp where I was like, you're not going to get every single car you want built as official Lego sets. The good news is that a lot of car fans are also Lego fans, and so there is a whole bunch of like custom mock makers and creators out there who are building sets for almost every car that you can hope for. Someone may have built it. There may be instructions out there, so go check Rebrickable or something. There is a huge custom car building community out there. The other 2 things that I would include in my hopes and dreams are that I wish that Lego would remake some of the cars that they made in the 6-wide format, not only the Formula One cars they made back then. They made a bunch of cool cars already, like McLarens and Bugattis and whatnot, that are very cool cars, and I don't know that we're going to get them again in this 8-stud wide format, but I would rebuy almost every one of them if they did. Also, I wish that Lego would make more what's a good example? Here. I wish that Lego would make more of these. If you can't tell what they are, this is a tiny Lamborghini Huracan and this is a tiny McLaren Elva. That are the same cars that are depicted here in big scale. Now they're in this little Hot Wheels scale. I wish Lego would make a bunch more of these as polybags, as gifts with purchases, whatever. I want to own small versions of every large car that I have here. I would buy all of them. They're like $5 a piece. Give me more of these also. And I know as I'm saying this, you're sitting there screaming at your phone or computer screen and telling me what car you would like to see made in Speed Champions form, and screaming won't do a thing. Leave a comment down below and let me know what kind of cars you would love to see as 8-stud wide Speed Champions. I will pass that on to my friends. Wink, wink. My friends, I don't have any friends that work at Lego, and if I tell them, I'll be like, hey, this commenter, he would like a Mitsubishi Eclipse created as a Lego set. My friends would be like, all right, but like, I'll tell them nonetheless. So leave a comment down below. Let me know what cars you would like to see turned into Speed Champions cars. All of this has hopefully been educational for you and will help you to either make a decision to become a Speed Champions fan or to continue to pass on the theme. Unfortunately, the fact is, if someone does not like cars, then they will not like this theme. Some other Lego themes have some wider, more mass appeal, like a submarine set or a mech set or a spaceship set. Even if you aren't a fan of the specific, the subject matter in that set, you can still think a mech or a spaceship or a submarine are all cool. And so there's a little more just general appeal to a set like that. A car, you're not going to buy a Lego set of a car that is like depicting a very specific car unless you're probably a fan of that specific car, or you just like me are a casual car guy. That's the unfortunate fact. I hope that fact does not make the Speed Champions line, fizzle before its time. But if you are a casual car fan like me, but you have been skipping out on the Speed Champions cars, I would encourage you to pick one up. They're usually only about $20 a piece. I think that's a decent deal for a car of this scale, size, and detail. Surely one of these 16 cars would appeal to you out there, so go ahead, go pick it up if you see it at a store, I assume you will enjoy the build. If you do, I'm sorry for what I've done to you, because you may want to go out and buy them all at that point. If you were already a fan of the Speed Champions line, let me know why you were. If you agree with my points of why the sets are great, if you disagree and you have your own reasoning, then let me know about those reasons in the comments down below. I think we're getting towards the end of our road trip. I hope you've had a good time riding along with me today, but unfortunately, this is your stop. This is now like a form of public transportation. It's now kind of outside of the context of the Speed Champions theme. That being said, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.